Start the recording. Since I did the video about four weeks ago, I went to go live and it didn't go live. It was nerve-wracking, but it's live now. Go ahead, guys.
All right, give thanks, family, for our fourth edition of the DEM Peer Educational Series. We're really excited about this evening and getting to hear some stories from everyone here tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you, Marcus and Bubbleman, for hosting this, this show and this space for us to be able to share our stories and to inspire. And, we really appreciate that. And, we just want to give a big thank you and a big acknowledgement to the community out there in the world right now. Anyone who's having any struggles right now or any sicknesses or having hard times getting food or medicine that you need, our heart really goes out to you. We know this is a really interesting time. And, we just want to invite you to come in to this meeting tonight, to this communication, this circle, this sacred conversation, and have a toke or have a tea or some food and just relax and hear everything that we all have to say. I'm just really thankful for this opportunity and give thanks, everybody. I'd love to hear from Holly Hall. You're going to be coming in this evening.
Yeah, so tonight we're going to be having Holly is going to be leading the discussion and the conversation. And Dr. Holly Hall, girl, you are an amazing woman. This is somebody who has been in the industry since 2012. You've been scouring the mountains of Northern California, talking to every single farmer that she can about how people can be more ecological, giving way and acknowledgement to clear water and clean resources. And she's been such a shining light. Holly, you're such an incredible shining light for our community. You're at every single community gathering with smiles on. You've been doing amazing work with the Humboldt County Cannabis Appellations of Origin. And you've been doing this amazing baseline study with all of us. And we're so excited to have you tonight. Thank you so much, Holly. I'm gonna hand it all over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate your kindness so much. I'm so lucky. I actually was born into the industry in rural Northern California, but then I went away and chose a different profession, I thought. But when I came back to Humboldt County with my PhD, turns out everything I went to school to learn about and all my work experience related to the restoration of watersheds and watershed smart communities set me up perfectly to work professionally in the industry as a soil and water scientist and as a consultant since 2012. So it's kind of amazing how our destiny or fate leads us to the places we are. And tonight, I'm really honored to be here with so many amazing regenerative cannabis farmers that I consider to be my friend and my inspiration for continuing to work to help shape policy and integrate cannabis farmers into policies that will protect and uplift people that are serving our earth and serving our communities. So tonight we're going to talk about appellations of origin, specifically related to cannabis. And appellations of origin are a legal protection for products that are grown in a specific place, and the quality of the practices and the culture and the soil and the environment is reflected in those products, making it very unique. Our most probably common examples are champagne and tequila, and if you're bubbly white wine and you're not grown in Champagne, then you're just a bubbly white wine. And that's definitely not as exciting. And no one's just popping a bottle of bubbly white when they celebrate. It's always champagne. And the benefits of having that recognition are that the champagne farmers are able to get more money for their products, and they're able to have a dependable livelihood because of that. And that economic gain stimulates neighboring farms that aren't growing champagne, but they're related to that region. And that notoriety also stimulates the economy of the communities that are dependent on those farmers. So as we move forward locally in California and globally with developing cannabis appellations, we have an exciting opportunity to bring the benefit of appellations to our communities. And I think that here with regenerative farming, we all agree that a cannabis appellation of origin should really be terroir based. And that means that we really want to have more than just a circle on a map. We want to have our appellations reflect the place, the culture, and the people. And right now, my dear friend Tina Gordon from Moonmade Farms is going to talk to us more about what a terroir-based cannabis appellation looks like and why that is exactly what we should advocate for. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. And thanks, Josh and Kelly. And it's wonderful to be a part of this incredible panel of people tonight. And so talking about a terroir-based appellation and a program that supports terroir-based appellations of origin, and why I think that's so important really draws back to why I'm sitting out here right now. And we're at Moonmade Farms. And it was here that I really started connecting, like what it means to be alive within a living system. I really didn't understand that before I started cultivating cannabis. And I think that this is an incredibly intelligent plant, that if we're exposed to how this plant is grown, and if we connect this plant back to source and back to place, that we have the opportunity to shift perception in a really powerful way. And for me, it may have been being on this land and being on a farm and working with this plant directly. But I'm hoping that this shift in perception and shift in consciousness can also happen through people understanding and acknowledging where this plant is from and the fact that it's alive and part of a living system. And so, and terroir meaning, what is the meaning of that word, right? And really it goes back to land. It means land. And so, and what is land and what is soil, but everything that makes up that soil. And so for many thousands of years before we landed here, this was here and it's been here. And we're in a place where this land and the native soil is extremely pristine. Like nothing has ever touched it. And it is of the rock and of the trees and of the wildlife and of the air and of the elevation. And it's everything that we're responding to as opposed to imposing upon it. And so, something that I've come into in the last few years, it started about 10 years ago after reading a permaculture book and wanting to build a hugel culture and wanting to do some sheep mulching. And from there, every year, integrating more practices into just becoming more regenerative with the understanding that I have an influence and I have an impact that is undeniable. I can't just pretend that I'm not affecting this place and affecting this land, but I have a choice in how to do this and how to take responsibility for this. And so I feel like it's not only the land, but it's the farmers. And so when you taste a flower, you're tasting the farmer. You're tasting all of the decisions that farmer has made, what time they decide to water, how much they decide to water, the water they're watering with, what inputs are in the soil, how they've built their soil or not, when they harvest, how long they dry, how long they cure, at what temperature do they control the temperature. And all of that together is this like incredible layered magic. And hopefully through a program with that is terroir based, we can start digging into some research and we can figure out why there are these similarities and differences from region to region, and why it might make an incredible difference for people to understand where their cannabis is coming from.
Thank you, Tina.
I think that's it.
You,
Yeah.
would you say that those differences in choices that regenerative farmers make and how they treat the plant would have an impact on the taste or the effects of that plant when consumed?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And it's interesting, and I wonder how many other people have had this experience where they're exposed to, say, other farms or many other farms' flower, and they start being able to smell similarities or taste similarities from farm to farm or from area to area, and how much there are overlapping similarities and differences. And for instance, with some farms, you can really taste like from a spectrum, they may have like, 10 different genetics that all have an undertone, like a similarity that is like a through line through all of them. And then is it possible that region to region, we're going to be able to sense the same thing? So yeah, I think that the decisions absolutely come across in all of the senses used to cultivate a plant. I think that comes across in the senses in that you use when you're ingesting a plant, for sure.
I agree. Thank you. And as a connoisseur of fine things, it's exciting to think about the opportunity to really learn more and have the opportunity to go into a dispensary or retail space and get to know the flower products based on their location and choose those locations that I enjoy. Thank you so much for your perspective. I appreciate it. So now
Thanks,
we're
Tom.
going to move on to have an overview of the state of affairs with cannabis appellations. First, Kelly from Dragonfly Earth Medicine will give us a global perspective, and then Swami from Swami Select will give us a perspective on California. Kelly, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, I mean, this global perspective as far as cannabis goes is really talking an underlying note of what we all understand and know, which is the cannabis culture. And this beautiful cannabis culture like connects us no matter where we are on the globe. Like I've always said, you can be anywhere in the world and you could even speak a different language, but if somebody's around the corner smoking a joint, you automatically have something in common. And not only are you sharing that joint, but we're talking about where is it from? What is the strain? What does it taste like? What are the effects? Ooh, you're from Spain. What is it for you? And for me, coming from the late 80s and into the early 90s and working with a lot of different cannabis, looking at it, mass amounts of it, I absolutely could tell the difference of what was being grown in Humboldt and what was being grown in Mendo and what was being grown down in LA. And, it was so exciting. Whenever you come up into those zones, you just knew what it is that you were going to get when you opened up that bag, and it just takes you over. And that's the terroir, that's the Appalachia. And that's happening all over the globe. We can go into the mountains of the Himalayas in India where they're growing the Milana cream, with their fingers. And when you smoke that, you can smell their fingers. You know that farmers have been working with that. That's terroir, that's the flavor, that's talking about the farmer. Tina, you said it so beautifully, like you always do, you're tasting the farmer, you're tasting the region, you're the air and the water, how do we define what Appalachia is? And I just think that we allow nature to define that for us. And no matter where we are in the globe, like, in Europe, they talk about, the differences in flavors of whether you're in Austria or whether you're over in Switzerland. And I think that it's incredibly important to gather all that excitement about what I'm talking about and start defining it, start writing this down, start coming to a place that we can all understand on a global level that these are these historical regions recognize these farmers so that we have a place in the world, we have a place in our industry. As we go into a federal legalization, we need to have a place in the world that Northern Cali grown is Northern Cali grown. And you can put that on a label, and it speaks volumes for the cannabis culture all over the world. It speaks volumes. And not only is it speaking volumes for the connoisseur and the people that love it, but it's allowing more economy and more ability for those farmers to be able to sell that flower as a specialty product because it's specialty to the terroir and region. So I love what you're doing, Holly, and all of the work that you're putting in with the Appellation. And I want to see it expand on a global level. You're putting down the work and the seeds for California, and an expansion is going to be incredible.
And California has an amazing, cannabis culture, and it's really easy, not easy, but there's a lot of defined areas in there. But when you look at appellations around the world and you realize that Oregon has a whole set of appellations, and there's Washington and British Columbia, up where we at in the East Coast, and really it's about like the minerals that you have in your area, and we're almost like we're farming the air as much as we're farming the minerals, what's in our land. So I encourage everyone online to think about what bioregion that you're in, and think about what you have that's really unique. Maybe you live in a avocado and a mango, banana, tropical cocoa world, and that brings out a certain flavor in your plants. Or maybe you have a forest or a deciduous forest, and people can start thinking about their bioregion, what they have to offer the world.
And
Thank
I agree.
you.
Something about regenerative farming practices and the way that it draws us a linkage to historical production of cannabis. Because with regenerative farming practices, you are really depending on the excess organic matter in your place to provide nutrients for your cannabis. And when I chatted with you earlier, Kelly, you mentioned that you felt like the appellations for cannabis have a really strong opportunity to protect and uplift those regions where cannabis has been historically produced. Do you mind talking about why that's important a little bit more?
I mean, I think that it's absolutely imperative. Not only are we talking about land races and we're trying to track and trace our genetics all the way back from where they came from, and that's a story of the strain and the genetics, but what about the story of the farmer? What about the story of those cultures who have made those beautiful strains that we now have, been able to make all of our varietals from? I think that it's incredibly important that we look back historically to a lot of those cultures who are still working. They're still doing the same practices that they've been doing for 200, 500 years. And they're up on the mountains, and they're exchanging cultural values, and they're also exchanging like a world distribution. There's incredible underground that's been happening. And now that we start to come into legalization and regulation, those stories need to be told. And not only do those stories need to be told, but those stories are totally imperative to the new laws and the regulations that are being made right now. Right now, unfortunately, Canada is really failing as far as it's concerned in like getting licensure out, and for people to understand the process, and for them to be doing it in a way that really makes sense. But if we have all of that knowledge of where it is that we came from, then we're able to write those laws that pertain to farmers and how we're doing it already, rather than trying to learn a language that we don't understand or know. So,
and we're in Canada in a federal legalization system, and I think that appellations of origin can bring attention to a region that's been producing for a really long time and has a certain flavor complex, and as corporate cannabis and more monotony, monoculture growing happens, you lose certain qualities within the plant. So appellations can help people define what's rare and unique about their
And it
area.
gives credibility to these people who have been doing it for, thousands of years. And I think that's incredibly important. We need to be able to talk about that history that has been underground for so long. And this is such a wonderful opportunity to all tell our story of how we came to cannabis and now how historical cannabis has made modern cannabis.
I agree. Thank you. Before we wrap up this section, Josh and Kelly, you both travel around the world quite a bit and visit regenerative cannabis farms. Will you tell us a little bit about some of the most common ways you see regenerative cannabis farmers improving the environment in which they work in?
One of the biggest things we see is just creating environment and creating diversity. And one thing that we really encourage within our certification and just within regenerative farming or biodynamic farming, as it is permaculture, all these different qualities that we bring to the table, we're creating environments. So what we're seeing is people waking up to food and different kinds of, local and native foods. And they're creating this amazing landscape, which is supporting not just the insects and the birds, but it's filtering the water. And we're seeing, how their water systems in their area are cleaner, and being able to produce cannabis in this way really shows us that when we travel in all these parts of the world, these are what are making the world a better place. And we really need these kind of stewards right now, because we're losing habitat at a really fast rate right now. So that's one of the most exciting things about for me, at least, and maybe Kelly can say something.
Yeah, I mean,
too.
we could go on for hours at all of the changes that we see, but one of the biggest ones that just speaks volumes is that I used to go onto farms in the late 80s, early 90s, and I would see a lot of pit bulls meet me at the driveway, and now there's a whole lot of alpacas that meet us at the end of the driveway. So that, right, where we come from and where we are now.
And I guess I'll also just say, people are not growing in pots anymore in the same way. So they're growing in the earth, and they're seeing how
soil building,
how that's saving water, and how that's really affecting the health and well-being of their plants. So, seeing people really harness going into the earth and growing out of the ground has been really pretty.
And also at the heady seed swaps now, it's like, yo, what do you got? Oh, whoa, I've got this incredible acorn squash. And everybody's like, yeah, dude, I want some of that. Never have I seen people so excited before about swapping vegetable seeds in the cannabis industry. And I'm seeing that worldwide, Holly, like with regenerative farmers everywhere.
Thank you so much. I really would like to see Appellation systems that support farmers, that take actions that clean the water and build carbon storage in soils and produce food. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Now, Swami, I would like for you to share with us a bit about your history working with Appellations in relationship to your farm, but mostly an overview in the state of affairs with cannabis appellations development in California.
Unmute me.
Oh, Swami's muted.
Yeah, okay. The mute problem we all have, right? Well, first of all, I wish I were talking about the international part as well, because I just love hashish from Nepal or India or places like that. I've been to many of those farms also back in the 70s. And one of the things that, that we really want to preserve these traditional ways of growing and the traditional land strain and land races that they have. But I also want to say about Appellation is that it not only is it protecting the farmer, but it really protects the consumer. And it's a two-way street. It's really a win-win situation. If you have some, Nepali hash, and it says on the label Nepali hash, and some sort of that's coming from the, from Langtang or something like that, or you have some Kulu Valley from India, that's then you want to know that it's really from there, right? It's, and so that will protect the consumer, just like calling it champagne, then you're getting the real stuff. So it's a two-way street, you know, it both benefits the farmer and the consumer. So in the state of California right now, we are putting out these regulations. The Department of Food and Agriculture has been working for about 1.5 years or so. And I've been working with a group called Origins Council, and we've been having direct input into the farmer, the CDFA working group. And this now Origins Council has a regional council, which is comprised of farmers, organic farmers, sun-grown farmers from Big Sur, from Santa Cruz Mountains, from Grass Valley in the Sierras, from Humboldt, association with Terra Carba and the Humboldt growers, and then also in Sonoma, and it's in Mendocino also. And so all these different areas are already developing their own idea that this is the way we grow in our area. And that's the thing about Appellation, is that you have your mineralogical and your geological differences from region to region. But the other thing is the culture, and Kelly was mentioning this about the culture of the people who actually do the work and have developed their special techniques that are best for the mountains of Big Sur and Santa Cruz, because they have different weather down there, and they're going to grow certain cultivars, as we all know, that are going to be more mildew and fog resistant. Some people over in Grass Valley, they're going to have a whole different kind of problem because they have so much sun and so on. So over time, we've developed these differences, and that's what I like to celebrate. You see, that's one of the reasons we do the Emerald Cup, is to celebrate the differences between all these different cultivars that come from different places. And you'll find the same cultivar will taste different and be different, grown even at a different altitude in Humboldt County. So these are the kind of distinctions that we want to celebrate, just like we celebrate wine, a different wine from a different vineyard and so on, and a different year harvest, right? We celebrate all those things. So now the California rules that have been put down are open for comment still up until May 6th. So this is important because the regulations they proposed are really not very favorable. They also seem to allow indoor and mixed light growers to be able to try and get an appellation. The process is that you can submit a petition to the state to ask for an appellation for your region. Before you do that, you need to get a group of a minimum of 3, and we'd like to raise that higher, maybe 5 or 6 farmers, to come together in their region, say here Bell Springs or Palo Verde, so on, that wherever the region is, that you have a minimum number of farmers who say, we're going to get together. Now we need to do this research. What kind of water do we have? You can test that. What kind of soil and rock for geologic formations do they have? What's our predominant weather? What's your elevation? What's your earliest frost? What's your latest frost? All this kind of data goes into saying why your boundaries that you're drawing with your appellation are unique. And so we have to then use all of that data to demonstrate that there is something very unique. And the appellation of origin is different from other geographic indicators in the sense that it has to be essentially or exclusively the product of that environment. That's what the legal term is coming out of France, right? A geographic indicator just says that it came from the county of Mendocino 100% or something like that. The state law already allows county of origin if your product is 100% from that. But if we want appellation of origin, then we have to also apply what are known as standards, practices, and varietals, specific to your region and your particular appellation of growing. And once you document that along with all of your meteorological data, your geographical data, you submit a petition to the state, and they will then grant you an appellation, or they won't. Now, how that process works is not very well defined in the regulations as they proposed. As I mentioned, there seems to be a little quirky thing where they will allow mixed light or indoor grows in there, which we have to totally fight against very, very seriously. In France, the key concept of terroir is no barrier between nature and your plant. Think about that. No barrier between nature and your plant. It doesn't mean that your plant has to be in native soil. It just means it has to be accessible, open to native soil, as if an hugel over the top is now integrating with native soil as the microbiome integrates between the roots and so on, the fungi, the hyphae, and everything in that hugel. So over 5 years, eventually your soil then becomes integrated with the local biome, right? So all of this stuff is still, they don't even have the word soil or microbiome in the proposed regulations. They are not considering the word terroir. And so we have to really push them to get what we need. And we have at Origins Council, our basic baseline request, we want the state to say, listen, in order to even begin a petition, you need to be in the ground. Doesn't have to be native soil, but it has to be connected to native soil, in the ground, right? Second of all, it has to be full sun. And third of all, no artificial light after flowering. And you can have artificial light and you can have it in pots up until, you know, it shows sex and so on. You're not totally forbidden to use that. But once it's vegetating and in flowering, I like to say in the ground, full sun and long season, right? And so the point is that this is the way that nature has its greatest impact on the plant, which means that not only is it the genetics and the soil, but it's also the threats of the environment, which cause the plants to produce certain terpenes that will be unique because the threat in your particular zone is unique. So the idea that we are creating a designation with standards, practices, and cultivars is actually very, very important because geographic indicators don't have those things. And I'll just talk a few minutes more. The fact is that in the United States, there is no appellation of any agricultural product. You will see appellation sometimes on vineyards, but it's a misuse of that word. They really are not legally entitled to use appellation. They have what are known as AVA, American Viticultural Area. And all that means is that your area grows grapes. And in Napa, you can call it Napa or you can call it Yountville or Rutherford, whatever, if 85% of the grapes in the bottle come from Napa. So obviously the rest of them come mostly from Mendocino because they're cheaper. So our thing is it has to be 100% in the appellation zone. One other problem with our thing now also is about processing, because technically speaking for an appellation, the processing, that is to say at least the trimming, needs to be also in the appellation. And that's the standard thing for the European appellations. Most of us up here in the mountains don't have the proper zoning or a commercial building to be able to do processing in our thing. So that's a problem we have to work out also. But basically the key thing is we need to have a baseline from the state, which is to say in the ground, full sun, and long season is my short term for it. And that means that there will not be any mixed light or any indoor allowed in this process. But there's we're offering on special offer today to indoor and indoor growers. What we're saying is if you are an indoor grower, you can't have appellation. If you're a mixed light grower in a greenhouse, you can't have appellation. It just is, there's a barrier between your plant and nature. But what those both indoor and mixed light need to do is create a certification process for your indoor or your mixed light, demonstrating that you are using environmental techniques, you are using good soil, you're using everything, the standards that you create for yourselves as mixed light, as indoor. And then appellation becomes reserved for outdoor, for sun grown. And in that sense, it's an aspirational mark. Not very few people will qualify to begin with, but it's something to aspire to that not only will guarantee your product and its quality, give you a better price guaranteed to the customer, but also it raises, as everybody says, it raises the boat. So if people know it comes from Mendocino, already it's pretty good. If they know you're coming from Bell Springs, even if you don't have the appellation, it's going to be pretty good. So it benefits everyone in that sense. So anyway, that's all I have to say for the moment, but I could talk forever, just like Kelly and Josh. Blessings.
Thank you, Swami, for sharing your perspective. I would love to talk with all of you forever, and I'm excited to know that we get to continue our conversation beyond this 2 hours. So as you can see from our overview, is that what we're dealing with are this very human and simple activity of growing food, growing cannabis, of being farmers in a way that benefits our community and benefits the planet is having kind of a hard time being fit into the construct of a regulation, which is the Appellations of Origin. To get those protections, it's a regulation, and it's kind of hard to put people into regulatory frameworks. But if we get them right, then there can be many benefits. And so I think that's what inspires me to work hard towards informing cannabis appellations, policy processes. And I think that that's what inspires many of you too. When we think about appellations of origin and cannabis appellations of origin, I think that the main components of where benefits may be felt are related to people, place, and plant. And so now moving forward, we're going to have several talks that focus on the people and potential benefits derived from appellations of origin, and the place, and then the plant. To start us off with people will be Jacob and Carla from Flower Days Farms out in Trinity County. Would you like to take the floor, my friends?
Sure. Hi, Holly. Can y'all hear us okay?
Hi.
We're so excited to be here. Hi. I really just, there's a lot of things that Swami said just now that really made me think about what it all comes back to is that cannabis appellations are ultimately for the people, for the community, and for the larger community, which is the planet, but they should provide important protections for our heritage and our culture, as well as give much needed valuation to natural farming practices and traditions. Essentially, these traditions being in the soil, in the natural environment, coupled with human interaction, make this beautiful intertwining that it's really critical that we take into account how humans have intentionally interacted with the plant over time, and how we've cultivated over time has built a culture and heritage around these regions, and up here we really hold a lot of value in our roots here in the Emerald Triangle. And I think protecting that heritage and that culture is ultimately about benefiting our community as much as it is about benefiting the land. But it's our story, it's our soul, just as much as it is our soil, which makes our products singularly unique to the people of a given place. That intention that they put in, and the traditions and the culture that they hold to in their region that are unique to them are really special. And appellations of origin, as they are recognized globally, do serve as a way to protect that story, that culture, that community that distinguish a people. And ultimately, it is the people ingeniously producing something special that gives a place and a product its global reputation. So they, need to benefit directly from that. And true terroir can really only come from a culture and heritage rooted in natural farming practices. When you're practicing farming regeneratively, you're elevating your product to having true terroir standards, and those elements are unique to your land and your culture. And that's what makes it so special, is the place where it's grown and the people behind the plant, the culture and the community in which is embedded this rich tradition of medicine makers, healers, farmers, of generations of people who went to great lengths and to bring this medicine to the world. And it's not only the place, but the people and their story that make a product singularly unique. And the community behind that product is really important, that we're representing that. And so if people out there have questions, they should reach out to Origins Council and to their local associations, because we're all in this together, and the heritage regions have a voice together at the table, and it's really important for us to be heard. So ultimately we're all interdependent organisms, and we're in integrated ecosystem, one community of organisms, and our ability to thrive is collective, and our community's ability to really honor itself and reap the benefits of what it sows, and create its own abundance and build resilience and balance are what this is really about.
Thank you. Carla, may I ask a question?
Please. Yeah.
In your community over the last year or so, there has been a lot of organization among the cannabis farmers. You formed the Trinity County Agricultural Alliance, and within that alliance, you have formed partnerships with at least one watershed association and the county fairgrounds, and there are so much more. Can you talk to us a little bit about the benefits to your community at large that have been happening with the organization and coalition of your cannabis farming community?
Thanks, Holly. Yes, it's really exciting. We've had a lot of grassroots work together that we've done initially. You know, we are such a small population dispersed over so many mountains away from each other that really when we come together, it's a small room full of people that all know each other. And so over time, we developed just the style that didn't have a formal organization and didn't really require one. But in the end, we were really a little bit disabling ourselves because we didn't have a formal united voice. And we finally were able to like really come together as a county, and we formed the Trinity County Agriculture Alliance, which is the first trade association in Trinity County for licensed legal cannabis industry. And so we've been spearheading that project since we were founded last October, and it's been really exciting. We've had a lot of support in the community, and we've been able to really work towards getting a lot of licensed farms on board and help them with all of the aspects of the market and compliance, and you know, all of the challenges that we all face, and also be a formal voice for Trinity in policy and advocacy at the state level. And so we're participating in the Origins Council. I'm really excited to be a part of that for the regional council representing TCAA in Trinity County. And so we're you know, really trying to be a united voice for all of our collective watersheds, but we're working with watershed organizations, nonprofits, and really collecting a lot of important data and figuring out how we can work together to regenerate and remediate on a community-wide scale. And so there's a lot of work being done to try and connect smart policy with things that not only protect our heritage regions, but bring monies back to the heritage regions for things like watershed remediation on entire watershed scale, really be able to integrate everybody into some amazing practices that are making a huge difference. And if we can all really achieve this together, then we're really taking a huge step towards real regeneration of the earth and of our own communities. And it's exciting to see the potential of all that growing now.
Thank you so much. And congratulations on implementing regenerative farming practices that build your soil, and at the same time building your community, and also at the same time getting 3 awards for your flower this year or last year with the Emerald Cup. I think that's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
It's so good. Jacob, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so. I think Carla said that beautifully.
Okay, thank you for being with us. To
Yeah.
continue the conversation about the potential benefits of appellations on people, we're going to go back to Josh and Kelly to continue the conversation about historic regenerative farming practices. And these farming practices represent standards. As we move forward with developing appellations, we have the opportunity to protect farming standards so that the consumer can know that they are reliably obtaining a product that was grown in a way that regenerates the earth and the community and is free from harmful chemicals. So I'm excited to learn more from you both about how we can continue this thread from our historic farming regions into our modern time of regulation so that we're really protecting those habits and creating those standards.
You know, the grandmother's recipes, there wasn't always synthetic NPK nutrients. There's old fermentation recipes. There's something that we call within the DemPure certification, which is a closed loop, when there wasn't wheels to get into town and people to buy your nutrients from every single thing, every input, everything that was made came off of your farm. That creates an incredible biological intelligence to every single seed that you plant year after year. It creates a biology in the soil that accepts that seed. It knows it, it understands it. Every recipe that's put onto the soil, whether it be for soil building or for tea making, the soil and the microbes understand that. That's incredible intelligence that really helps us to be able to grow better, healthier, better crops, you know, in all ways, more medicinal crops
So
in all ways.
we live in a time right now when we have the opportunity to look back historically when it was regenerative. And those were those times when, you know, when we were regenerating, giving biomass back to the earth. And then we know after the 40s came and after that kind of chemical revolution came, it really affected our topsoil. So right now what we have to do is just look at back to things like biodynamic farming, you know, which that requires everything to come off your farm, closed loop, 100%. And now we look at our modern environment right now. This modern environment we live in has a top level of toxicity, and it just like our bodies, we're a little bit of cumulative toxed out as a human race, and that's part of why this virus is going so fast, is because there's a toxic accumulation. So what we've seen with our products, that we have to test our products coming in to a human grade toxicity level rather than relying on agricultural standards. And because the agricultural standards kind of have loopholes set up in them. So what we're saying is the regenerative farming right now is we need to not sustainably farm, and we don't want to sustain this broken system. We want to regenerate the life on earth, and we want to create systems that are replenishing our carbon sink and putting our stuff back in. So regenerative farming, like with our certification, we're telling people that, you know, it's going to be better for you now that we're seeing cannabis being the most tested thing in the world, you know. So toxicity in our cannabis flower afterwards is an issue for us. So these regenerative techniques are making our ending medicine better. So regenerative farming is a way of making our land better. It's a way of making our medicine better. And it's a way that, like Swami said, you know, the consumers can look at it and get a safer product. So yeah, that's what these farmers that are here right now are making a difference. And it's a goal too. We're all trying to work on it. We're not all exactly perfect regenerative farmers. We really want to get better. So we want to,
all of you on here are, though.
well, we want to encourage everyone, including ourselves, to try and get better, you know, to try and learn more about our environment.
And, you know, Holly, I've got to say just really quick is, like, when we talk about historical, we're talking about our DNA, we're talking about our connection to the earth, our connection to nature, our basic human right to be earth loving creatures. We get all of our sustenance from the earth. Everything that we have comes from the earth. So that basic intuitive connection is what is so incredibly important when we talk about history of the land and Appellation terroir.
I agree. Thank you. When we move forward with codifying appellations, we will define some standards that relate to the way we farm. And when we think about regenerative farming, it's very much so like we did historically always as humans, because it's so dependent on the natural environment around us. Can you share with us just maybe a few easy regenerative farming standards that bridge that gap throughout history that anyone could probably implement, even if it was in their backyard, and that could be included in an appellation to help the consumer know that they're getting a product that was grown in a regenerative way?
I think for one thing is composting talk about it and a lot of people do it. Probably the one thing that you're going to realize is going to build your heart, and then you're going to start thinking, hey, how am I going to build my compost? And so you might want to plant some trees and some shrubs and all the things that are going to go along with it to support your closed loop system. So hopefully you're going to be able to create environments on your land. So I would say planting trees and shrubs and superfoods and those types of things, which you can use as nutrients, you know, by building compost or learning how to ferment teas. I think hugelculture is the biggest one, you know, putting carbon into the ground and creating a beautiful bed in your background. That can be done in a raised bed. It can be done in your backyard. But then that compost going in on the carbon and then learning how to ferment teas. Those 3 quick things is like, maybe there was 4 in there, I'm not sure, but you know, those things are going to get you really far into it. And that's going to be the beginning part of your inspiration. That's going to spark your microflora to learn more.
And if you're a cannabis farmer and you just want one regenerative tip, reuse your leaves. If you make hash, reuse your leaves. That's really easy. And if you live in a suburbia or even in a city, you can use your grass clippings to nutrify any kind of garden space or even the pots that you have to work in. You know, plants feeding plants is an incredible, intelligent, very ancient practice that plants and nature and soil understand.
And having something blooming at all times, some type of flower blooming at all times.
Thank you. So I hear you talking about growing your fertility, growing your biomass, growing plants that can feed you, they can provide medicine, and then they can also feed your plants. And I hear you talking about cultivating plants that are flowering, supporting pollinators, so then you don't have to rely on pesticides and you're contributing positively to the environment and yourselves. I think those would be great standards to be included in any appellation. Thank you so much. I appreciate your perspective. Now moving on and closing our section on the potential benefits to people that a robust cannabis appellation system will benefit. It will be Sandra from Moongazer Farms in Mendocino County. Sandra, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Great to see everybody. Yeah, so I think the appellations work is so important because it's really practical and there's a lot of stuff that's already been set up. I'm not sure, Holly, if you wanted to direct this a little more or you want me to just go?
Go for it. I'll ask questions after. Yeah.
But I really think Swami, who has done tons of work as well as so many people on this panel, but he said it just right. You know, we're talking about plants being in the ground, you know, under the sun, under the moon, and just Josh is talking to me. Okay, but yeah.
Josh and babies can join you. It's not going to bother us.
Yeah. And I just think that appellations are a really practical thing. It's already, we don't have to like reinvent the wheel. It's something that our legislators know about. It's something that certain people know about. And I think it's just one of these things that we can see it, we can understand how it can benefit the cannabis community, the greater community, and there's laws being written right now. And I didn't realize that we have like a short period right now to really impact the verbiage. And maybe you guys can talk a little bit more, like is May 6th, like in a few weeks, is that something that's like gonna really?
May 6th is the end of the public comment period for the California Department of Food and Agricultural's draft regulations for our appellations program. California is mandated by law to have a cannabis appellations program ready by January 1st, 2021. So May 6th is that time. I know that Origins Council is working on comments and we'll have public meetings. ICFA's regular meetings on Monday, we're going to talk through the recommendations for comments that we have developed in a subcommittee. So that's Monday mornings. I should know what time. Tina, do you know what time for the ICFA? But if you go to their webpage, it's there.
I want to say 10. Let's verify.
Okay, yeah, we'll find out while we're on this, but so it's definitely hot time. Everybody has draft comments and they'll be discussing. So please join.
Love to.
And also, yeah, May 6th is the deadline for putting any comment in. They did extend it. It was like April 14th or something like that. There's also some pressure to maybe even extend it even further. But if you have a comment, now is the time to send it. You can go online and read actually the recommendations, the actual regulations themselves. Just go to Cal Cannabis and then you'll have some links to follow there and read their regulations, and you'll have a lot of things to say because they're not that favorable to sun-grown farmers. We have to really pressure them to change some things to make them really protect us and the public as well. So do it, read about it, and call your congressperson, whoever. This is a moment of real cannabis action. The thing about appellations, this is something that started with us. It's something that came out of our community. We asked for it. And we also, as the petitioners, are the ones who create the standards. And so it's something that, is self-generated. So we really need to push it, and we need to make it so that it does not allow indoor and mixed light farmers. So if you want to comment, do it now.
I have a quick question. Do you have to be from California to
resident?
make the comments? Just wondering, it might be useful for people from anywhere to comment on it because it's like it's
going to affect us all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think any comments would be welcome. And I would love to talk to you about your perspective on the regulations personally. So there will be ICFA's Appellations of Origin Committee will be hosting a thorough discussion of draft of comments from Origins Council. Janine will be there and Kristen Nevedal will be there from ICFA to present the comments that from both of those organizations that are largely in coalition. And that's going to be from 4 to 5:30 on April 27th. So you could jump onto the icfa.farm webpage and get that info. Okay, Sandra, Detour, you threw it back to us, babe. Oh, Swami,
the Origins Council, Regional Council, the Regional Council, which Trinity and Jacob and Carla are part of, there's about 7 organizations now in the Regional Council, and they are preparing their comments also, which have been talked about and reviewed for weeks now. But like I say, it's really important for all of you to read those proposed regulations, because if any of you do decide you want to submit a petition, you got to know all the details. And then start working on what you think standards are for your group. What are the things that you say or make yours tough special?
Yeah, it's true. Thank you, Swami. So Sandra, coming back to you, when I chatted with you a little bit, you mentioned that you feel like a good cannabis appellations program could benefit people by helping the consumer to differentiate quality products in the marketplace. Would you like to talk more about that now?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's kind of touched on that a lot, already, and I just agree with so much of what has been talked about. And it just, if we can get this right, which it seems like we have our work ahead of us in the next couple of weeks to make sure that the policymakers get, understand us and what we do, because that's not their job. It's our job to grow it the right way. It's their job to write the policy, and it's our job to educate them, tell them, make it clear for them. So we have our work cut out for us, it sounds like, over the next couple of weeks. So it's great that we're doing this now. But if we can draft, good regulation or whatever, create good regulation, then we can have just such a great time, comparing our products, our bud grown in Mendo with that, grown somewhere else in the country and hopefully eventually somewhere else in the world. And it just sounds like it could be so much fun. And and of course, there's just so much to gain from treating this plant with the kind of love and respect that, you know, this appellation ideals can kind of convey to the consumer, I think. Yeah, so I just think it's a easy way, like you're talking about champagne, like, you know, you get married, let's spark a doobie from the Emerald Triangle, you know, like, or you have a celebration. I just, you know, like, let's get something that has meaning, you know, that has terroir, that has, you know, cultural, geographical, historical meaning, impact. And I think, yeah, I'm just so on board with all the work that has been done with appellations for cannabis in particular.
Thank you. You know, when we talk about consumer, and then I think of your farm and many of your farms, the consumer includes people that eat food. When I go to your house and I visit, I'm always so joy-filled eating there, which I like to eat everywhere, but like at your house in particular, you're so good at, your meals are probably 95 to 99% food that you've produced on the farm. And now I know that you are growing excess food and selling it. And I think that that's a huge benefit to the consumer. Sorry about that. To the consumer in general. Do you think that food production could be a standard that is required and protected by a specific appellation?
Oh gosh, wouldn't it be just amazing? And wouldn't it change everything to, you know, to the land, to the watershed, to the quality of foods we eat? I mean, that's why I always just feel like so excited that I am a cannabis cultivator at this time in, you know, of legalization, in this time of the cannabis plant, that we have such an opportunity here. And I think we could, you know, seems like our food systems have, you know, become really a manufactured kind of system, which is what, you know, farming has become really just, yeah, just not, yeah, it's just not what I'd like, you know. And so with cannabis, we have, it's amazing that maybe we have an opportunity to impact food farming. And that is just, you know, the plant teaching us and the wisdom of the plant and kind of all kinds of things that I don't even know about or understand, that's just happening, you know, that we're all a part of.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely want to eat food that's produced locally and from regenerative farms. So I appreciate you and your efforts. And I appreciate you all for coming together and talking about how an appellations program can protect people like you, and the people that consume your cannabis, and the people that consume the food that you grow, and the people that live downstream from your farms where you have your ponds that are recharging groundwater and filtering runoff. I really appreciate all your work. Another component of appellations that gets kind of tricky sometimes is place, because as we move forward with appellations, we could simply draw a circle around a map and call it good. You could grow your cannabis however you want within that circle, or we have an ability to draw a boundary on a map that has meaning. And so we're going to have 3 speakers now talk about this idea, the benefits of cannabis appellations in place, and starting with Daniel Stein. And I have had the pleasure of talking with you, Daniel, about your perspective on defining place in terms of appellations. And I appreciate all the food you produce from your place and all your community works. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. When you asked me to talk about place on this, it made me really look deep into what place means to me. And what I came up with is on the surface, place is a combination of minerals and topography and soil, plants and animals and microbes and all the physical things that make up a place. And then there's people and culture and the practices that have evolved there. But then there's more than that. There's a synthesis that happens when all these things are brought together, and there's a magic that happens that creates place out of the elements that it's built out of. And that intact ecosystem, that thriving magical relationship between people, animals, forest, water, and place, that is terroir. That is what you taste in food. That is what you feel when you consume cannabis that truly is of a place. And I think there's, beyond the appellations, there's a responsibility as a cannabis producer, because cannabis isn't just nutrition. Cannabis at its most precious is the ability to connect people back to source. And we don't want to connect them back to a diesel generator. We want to connect them back to fresh water and trees and connect them back to source. And so to me, that to connect somebody back to something, you have to be growing that cannabis out of that thing that you want to connect back to. You need to be growing that cannabis out of that wholesome, intact, thriving, intertwined biological ecosystem. And the values of a place that are able to produce that medicine become the elements that are valued in it. And this is something that's really fascinating to me. I grew up much of my youth on the big island of Hawaii in Kona. And Kona is known worldwide for the quality of its coffee. Kona coffee gets twice the price that coffee gets of any other region in the world. And one of the things that, there's a number of things that make Kona coffee so special. Most of it's grown under the shade still, under canopy. The Big Island is raw, fresh volcanic rock, full of minerals. Every afternoon on the Big Island, the clouds gather and it sprinkles, and there's natural shade in the coffee growing region. So there's these raw elements that make the coffee what it is. And those elements become something of value themselves. So if you're a farmer in Kona, if you're trying to dig an outhouse, that raw volcanic rock is the worst thing in the world. But if you value it based on what magic can come out of it, you can create, you can leverage the value of things in the ecosystem that often don't get valued out in the world. So here in California, to me, thinking about place, I think about how much this place is intertwined with a human history of relationship. What we see as a natural ecosystem here is actually thousands upon thousands of years of human interaction with place and humans stewarding and shepherding this place. The forest health is dependent on people, just as people are dependent on the forest health. And when I started thinking about terroir in this regard, one of the things that came back to me is studying fire ecology and the use that native peoples here had with fire on the land. And one of the primary thing people ate here was acorns. And if I were to go out and collect acorns out in the forest here, tan oak acorns are the best. They're the sweetest, they're the biggest, they're incredible acorns. If I were to go out and collect acorns simply in the fall, what I would get is not very good. I'd get a lot of acorns with worms in it. I'd have to pick through the duff on the flora and the trees aren't as healthy as they used to be. And people here, one of the things that they did is they knew their place and they knew their timing. And when the first acorns dropped with the acorn worms in them, they would light a fire in the evening that wouldn't burn very hot. And it would burn up the acorns on the ground, and the smoke would sit in the treetops, and all the worms would fall out of the trees and burn up in this light fire. And it would clear out the dust. So then when the majority of the acorns fell, they were perfect. And the tree got the minerals and the pH change from the ash from this fire. So there's this inherent knowledge and cooperation between people and place that makes the products better and more special than they are alone. And in the capitalist culture we have, place isn't something that's valued beyond somewhere for rich people to go visit and tour around. It doesn't get a monetary value in our capitalist culture. And in our capitalist culture, things that don't have a monetary value get exploited and don't stay intact. And I think one of the biggest leverages we have with defining appellations and defining terroir is realizing that an intact ecosystem and the products that can come out of that are like a bridge of understanding to a world that only values products. That without this intact ecosystem, you can't have the finest cannabis in the world. You need to keep ecosystems intact to have the quality of cannabis, the quality of food, the quality of champagne. That's not possible without these ecosystems. And therefore, even as our culture and economy catches up to know the value of things beyond its economic value, there's a way for us to say, no, you need this intact. You need it intact to have the quality of products that you want from it. And in that way, we can preserve our practices, our relationship, and our ecosystems, because that is how we can provide this product to the world.
Thank you. When we think about place, we could think about it at different scales. What scale are we talking about? Your farm is one of the 2% of farms in Humboldt County that farms on a stony loam. Does having a stony loam define your farm? Or like, I think maybe all of you here, you use rainwater to irrigate your crops. Does that define place? Or is it the reach of the food that you sell at the farmer's market? Or is it something else entirely?
I mean, I think what defines place is so many different things that it becomes very complex to communicate to a consumer. I think on a level that we can communicate to the world, we have to look at a broader scale, because yeah, in some ways, I'm at a 700-foot elevation. I'm in a small creek valley with deep soils, right at the edge of the fog line. We get colder nights than the ridges. I might have more in common on my farm with somebody at a low elevation 100 miles away than I have with somebody right up the ridge. But I don't believe that we can cut this idea of appellations up into a million different pieces and try to have people who are consumers understand those micro differences. That comes from a direct relationship. When a consumer, like Tina was saying, you taste and feel something different from a farm. When a consumer connects with our product and says, I really like the smell or the taste or the way that particular farm's product makes me feel, we can communicate with them what that comes from. But I think on a terroir level, it really is a bioregion that can be defined by ridges, by river valleys, by overall climate, like that. And then I don't really see how we can subdivide it very much and communicate it. I've thought about it a lot and looked for ways to do that I feel like consumers would understand. But what I keep coming back to is, you know, an appellation that's maybe there's only 2 or 3 of them in the whole Emerald Triangle, but what they all have in common, even though there's microclimate differences, is that it's coming from regenerative practices grown in the sun in intact ecosystems that are grown by people who are working to regenerate and rebuild the relationship with those ecosystems and the plant. And I think that matters with the outcome so much more than, you know, something like whether you're at the edge of the fog bank or slightly above or below it. Those things will come out in the product, but I think that, you know, we're working where a lot of people don't really even know the difference between indoor and sun grown, or much less between mixed light and sun grown. So keeping the message as simple and pure and as possible, and keeping the standard for entry into this as high as possible, so that it doesn't get muddied down. People don't get batches of you know, salt grown weed that burns their lungs that have an appellation on it and think the idea is bad, you know.
Thank you. I agree that place has a broad definition, and it's very personal and difficult to communicate. So we all have a big challenge ahead of us. And to help us understand this concept of place a bit more, Dylan Mattola from Matoli Valley Organics will talk to us. And Dylan is another Humboldt County farmer. And, you know, I think, what do you think, Dylan? You have those stones, but I think you might be a sandy loam over on your River Terrace farm. What do you think?
Well, it depends upon what part of my farm we're talking about. And, you know, like Daniel said, this is where I think when we look at place and we talk about appellations, we're talking about multiple sciences. And something to remember is that even in California's regulation, proposed regulation, is it, Holly, I think 2 or 3 of the sciences are social sciences. And so culture plays a huge part into this concept. You know, we're talking about the direct connection between the geographical place and the production that takes place there, and the culture, as well as the people. And these 3 things really are all intertwined to make up what I feel is place. It's not just a circle on a map, although there will need to be a circle on a map. And so we don't want to box ourselves in too much to defining, as, you know, soil types as exclusively, you know, we're only going to define ourselves in this appellation if we have super similar indicators like that, because there's so much more to what makes place in the sense of the culture and you know, the plant, people, plant, place. They're really all intertwined into one thing, which becomes the place. So, you know, this really ties into this definition of terroir, which, you know, translates loosely to the taste of place. And it's very complicated to try to define it through regulation, but this is what we have to do. This is our task. And so I think we're all on the same page. I love the concept of just, you know, very simple in the sense of must be grown in the ground. You know, we can't extract the taste of the earth if we're growing in a pot. We're just not connected. And under the sun is crucial. So I think we have these things, but as Swami pointed out, you know, they've left the door wide open in that they left it open to individual petitions to exclude growing types. And that's a real, that's a real problem, because of course you could not exclude indoor, you could choose to exclude nothing and just make it, the other standards are a lot easier to meet. So, but when we talk about place and the effect on how an application could affect a place, it really does get exciting. I mean, I think a well-designed appellation will promote the shared culture of all the local farms inside of that area, and promote the development and the local pride, and really enhance the local economy through promoting these agricultural practices, which the consumer will be able to translate into a taste that equals a higher quality. And so, the benefits on the place itself are really widespread. As we see people starting to dig deeper, like Daniel was talking about, and talking about this taste of their place, it really tends to build a stronger relationship between those people that start digging in and thinking about this, and we get into the the ideas of bioregionalism, and like people starting to feel more connected with their place. And so we're really in an exciting place here with cannabis and with appellations to come into our communities and look at how our farms integrate more than just economically, but in all aspects of our communities. And I think that's really an exciting and beautiful thing about place. There's, in the cannabis industry specifically, there's so much competition, and we're really all kind of pushed towards driving our brands and having the best strain and all that. And I see appellations as a really exciting venue for us farms to get outside of that and get back to more of a communal way of working together, because we're going to all be working together to raise the standard of what these appellations will individually be, through genetics that we're going to be working together on, because we're going to be striving to grow things that specifically work in our community. And so it's not going to be about just getting the best seeds down at the cup that were developed wherever. It's going to be about working with farmers that are growing things specific to our region, and we're going to be forced kind of away from that competitive side into working more closely with each other. And I think that's a huge effect to the place, because when we work together, closer together, we have a stronger community. And that's really, I think, a direct benefit to the place, because again, I see the place as the people. It's all the same thing. And from a physical standpoint, through these practices, we're really talking about growing in a way that will benefit the physical earth around us so much more than just putting up more hoop houses and pumping out more depths. We're talking about slowing down, and that directly translates into more water in the rivers and a better environment around us. So I think everything about the appellations really pushes us back in a direction of working together. And
thank you so much. I agree. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how, just kind of an inside peek into how you and your neighbors that are talking about forming an appellation, how are you considering drawing that circle on the map? What type of details go into that?
Well, what we're looking at is we started out with kind of a really small area, thinking just kind of the immediate farms that we're talking, kind of in our lower Mattole Valley area. And when we looked at it, we had to take a step back and say, wait, what we're really talking about is not just an appellation that we're going to promote to Humboldt County and to California. We're talking about a national scale and ultimately a global scale. So, we've really expanded the reach of what we're considering to be our map, and gone from kind of a watershed only boat focus to more of, a broader reach of maybe the Lost Coast. And like Daniel said, Daniel's an hour away from me, but we share a lot in common. He's at 700 feet, I'm at 350 feet, but our day night temperature swings are very similar, and we're very close to the we're both probably, you know, 15 miles or so from the coast's edge, even though we're an hour drive apart, you know. And so the process has been getting together, talking, having community meetings, redrawing maps, drawing maps, and then really expanding the outreach and finding out who else would consider them part of us, as opposed to locking people out. It's more about who does assimilate with us, who considers them part of what would be an appellation that we may create, as opposed to looking at it as like putting up a wall. It's, you know, more like, okay, let's make sure we don't close the borders on anyone. And of course, then, you know, practices, it has to be, you know, shared common values in our petition. And although the state is leaving a lot to be defined, and is probably will leave the door wide open for a lot of techniques and things that we don't consider should be in an appellation, we're probably not going to get everything we want. But the beauty of the process is that we define ourselves. This is 100% farmer driven. So it's up to us. We can say, like, we are a regenerative appellation, or we are this. We can create our own standards. That's part of the process. And as long as we can defend them as unique and justify them, then we have at least the right to put a petition forward based on whatever standards we feel makes up our community.
Thank you so much, Dylan. I appreciate your perspective, and I cannot wait to learn more about your community's appellation development as you move forward. When we talk about the potential benefits to place derived from cannabis appellations, I think a lot about the rural areas in Northern California where we have farmers kind of working in remote locations that are extremely beautiful, and where we are moving away from an economy that's based on catastrophic resource extraction like clear-cut forestry and over-harvesting of fisheries, towards one where we can have a sustainable agriculture model. And part of that is going to depend upon benefits of tourism that will be stimulated through the development of appellations. And we've seen across the world that where appellations are, tourism follows, which is exciting. My dear friend Season George from Five Sisters Farm has I would say by any definition, a craft farm, approximately 2,500 square feet. And she implements regenerative farming practices to keep her costs down. And also she has implemented some exciting strategies to benefit from tourism already and to continue doing so in the future. So now Season's going to talk to us a bit more about strategies for craft farmers in a cannabis appellation to thrive. Welcome, Season.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me? Everybody hear me? Yeah. I just want to say, you know, how lucky we are to come from an appellation with already such a stellar reputation. And I feel like forming these organizations is going to be the science, you know, to the mystique that has given us this reputation. You know, at my farm, I have just stayed true to my craft. I've been able to work across Southern Humboldt over the 11 years with 4 different places, and each place has required different practices, different strains, different, you know, totally different techniques, and has produced a really different product. So I can't even imagine trying to draw a circle around, you know, an area. It would be really hard for me to define a circle, but I'm really relieved to be able to focus on my tiny farm in this day and age. And for me to be able to do that, I've had to diversify my space. You know, rather than just designing a production zone, my space is a garden that can host people. It has an open space in the center that most people, when they come to visit me, they say, why is this big open sunny spot there? They can't understand it. It's a place that I've opened up through Hip Camp, which has been a really good support for me, because Humboldt County hasn't quite developed a land use ordinance for me to host cannabis tourists. So this is a way for me to just have camps in different areas, not in the cannabis garden, but and when they come here, it's just their reaction is like they've never even seen a plant outside of a building, you know, some of them, or they didn't know that they could just grow it in a garden, and they take away the sense of, I didn't know I could do this so easily. And, you know, I tried to inspire people like, yes, do that, but it's not as easy as it looks. It's taken a lot of development and a lot of soil development, and I don't know how to convey that, you know, to people in one visit. But
do you think that there's a greater benefit to community by hosting those people on your farm and having them see the way that you are making your own inputs through composting and through hugelkultur, and the way that you are growing such a wide diversity that you're able to sell more food and like host all of your beneficial insects? Are they picking that up from their one night there?
well, they definitely, I've had a few people who've come back, and that's been really interesting. And when they come back, they do come back with a list of questions, and a lot of people want to stay in contact with me. I don't have a program. I'm not a teacher, and it's interesting. I like to be at people's service, but at times I think, geez, maybe I should make a handbook or something, you know. But I have showed them your handbook, Carla. Tell them to buy yours. But for me, I mean, of course, they're overwhelmed with just the amount of flowers. They're overwhelmed. I encourage people to just eat from the garden. I just got chickens. I want people to make a breakfast, you know, and I try to make it accessible to them and not make it seem like it's a Shangri-La that they can't create, you know, like this is not, I'm just a person who loves what I do, and I'm really lucky to be able to do it. And you know, the last visitor I sent home with the flat of Sedum Acre. You know, I'm like, oh, she really liked that plant. I said, I happen to have a flat, take it, you know. And so that's a little bit of this appellation going home with them. It shows them how they're amazed how my garden is so lush, no water, you know, and they ask, how do I do it? Mulch, you know, and hopefully if there's one thing that they take away, it's mulch your garden. And they see that mulch, for sure.
But mulch.
More mulch. Really the one takeaway. Animals. Earlier, when you guys were talking about what are those three ancient regenerative components, I definitely wanted to say animals are one. I have my chickens, I have my bunny, and it's been a lot. Tiny little animals, tiny little farm. It's working for me.
Thank you. And you have lots of beneficial insects. Globally, our insects, our valuable pollinators, are struggling to thrive due to the loss of habitat and due to ecosystem disruption. Do you want to tell us a little bit about all of your beautiful ladybugs?
Yeah, well, Holly's referring to the carnage I had with ladybug splatter on my shins when I was weed eating. I couldn't believe it. I've never had so many ladybugs before to where I've weed eated and they're splattered on my shins. So I have a lot of calendula. I have a lot of yarrow. I have constantly something blooming right now. It's mainly the penstemons. The poppies are starting to bloom. I have a lot of verbenas blooming right now. I mean, I like flat flowers. Insects like to land on something, so a lot of flat flowers. Tubular flowers are for the hummingbirds. I have a lot of those, but I try to give a lot of yellow, a lot of red, a lot of flat landing pads for those insects, and it seems to work. I have a alyssum growing. The alyssum has overwintered, and I really recommend that. I just planted a lot of thyme, so I'm excited to see that fill in. But the alyssum has, this is its third spring. So
I love it. You told me that you grow so much diversity that it becomes a living mulch. And
yeah,
that living mulch is not only supporting pollinators, but it results in economic gain from you and for you in two ways. One, you're not buying any type of inputs to combat pests. And two, you said that you're growing so much living mulch that you're able to harvest and sell some of the herbs now. Is that correct?
yeah. Last year, right? Last year it was wild arugula, which I found was not a good companion plant for cannabis. Let me tell you, it did not. I took a lot of pictures. I need to like make a post about it. This year it's cilantro and parsley is just going nuts, and that I will mow down right before I plant the cannabis. And I just got Jip Oat Mill and Chautauqua's interested, so I'm really excited to sell that. You know, otherwise I don't know, I'd make pesto, lots of pesto, juice that parsley. But I you know, I was surprised really how easy it was for them to say yes, bring it in. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you. I'm convinced that food production and ecosystem restoration and support of on-farm pollinators through cultivation of biomass are standards that would benefit everybody if they were protected by appellations. I really appreciate your time and your expertise, Susan. Thank you for joining us. Now we have 3 more speakers, and we're going to move on towards our plant component of the discussion. How can appellation programs not only support our breeders' ability, our farmers' ability to continue developing genetics that produce good medicine and that are suitable for our place is a big question. And how can we free the plant? How can a cannabis appellation benefit the plant and the people that serve it? To begin our conversation will be Josh from Moongazer Farms. There you are. Thank you so much. And Josh is going to talk about regenerative farming practices in the plant loosely.
Hey everybody, nice to see your beautiful faces. I'm gonna try to be outside but have some light so you could still see me a little bit. Got some kiddos in there. Yeah. So could you just repeat that, Holly?
Thank you for joining us to talk about the potential benefits that appellations could have for the plant and our ability to breed it to grow the best medicine possible from considering our place. And you had told me that you wanted to just kind of talk about regenerative farming and how that stewards the plant in your place. But you can adapt. I want to hear whatever's in your head. You've got it all there.
Thanks, Holly. You know, yeah, I mean, like most people have been saying, it's been a big journey we've been going through, figuring out how we can close loops like all along the way. And we are blessed here. You can see these oaks and madrones behind us here. We've got great natural resources that we're able to use to build fertility and really just trusting our instincts a lot of times. I mean, like what Daniel had mentioned about the worms and the acorns and all, and the fire, and you know, that's some real amazing alchemy going on, and really understanding what sort of alchemy we can play with makes things really fun, and that goes along with breeding as well. You know, how can we breed different plants? How can we learn how the soil affects the health of the plants and the health of the seeds. You know, the seeds are always going off to a super great start when we breed them here, and they can handle the elements super well. You know, and we start them in the soil of our place here, when they're when they're young, and then they, you know, they're going into soil that's been nourished by wood chips, and the worms nourishing those wood chips, and breaking those down. And I really feel like, yeah, regeneration of land and place, and being on a homestead where we can really encourage different permaculture systems, and really stack functions, because it's not just like growing the plant. It's like, how can I tie in my house to like catch the water, you know, in a more efficient way, and creating ponds that can host life that we can nourish, and is really crucial. And you know, the overlap, I just think is just 100% overlap of terroir and regeneration. Uh, like I mentioned before, we have a lot of oaks and madrones on this land. We have a lot of holly. We have the toyon, with the beautiful red berries in the fall, and our goats really love those, and it's really lovely to, you know, watch them nibble things. We let them graze every day. We haven't really been feeding them much inputs from off-site lately, and they're our main fertility source. So really closing that loop, you know, if you have the goat meat or the goat cheese, uh, which we'll be getting into in the next couple of years, they'll be, you know, that they'll also have that place, and their fertility, their poop also comes from the place. And you know, as it gets broken down, you know, the worms too, I feel like they're adapting to this place. You know, they can handle, our worms here can handle, you know, the dryness. We definitely are keeping our compost piles relatively, you know, watered in the summertime, because it is quite arid. You know, we'll get temperatures in the mid hundreds for long stretches of the year, or long stretches of the summer. You know, a couple of weeks throughout the summer, it'll be blazing hot. So really just tying in all those aspects, you know, the more regenerative we get, the more tied into the terroir we can be. I mean, you know, our ethos is from seeds, in the native soil, you know, or built up mounds, from materials all here, in planted, you know, on some new moons in the spring, and harvested when they're ripe in the fall, you know. And I think autoflowers are a really cool way to get an early harvest, and still be in the rhythms of the cycles, and still be connected to the terroir. But light depths is not something we've been too interested in, just because that's not what we want to smoke. Like we love to smoke stuff that's been planted, you know, in the spring and harvested in the fall, because, you know, a 12-12, you know, when you're pulling the tarps at exactly 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. or whenever time, it still is, it throws, to me, it just throws off the natural cycles a bit, and it's not as tied into things like the moon, which the moon and the cosmos, I don't think that light can penetrate the depths as much too. But anyway, that's just me being a outdoorsy guy. But let's see, it might be a little quieter in here. I might be able to step in and get some light.
Josh, I know that your primary inputs are goat manure, and you harvest a lot of woody material through your fuel load reduction program. You're in a fire-prone area, and then you're creating massive amounts of worm castings in situ. Have you grown any seeds or put any cultivars or phenotypes in your soil under those conditions that they were just clearly not suited to those conditions? Or does every seed love the perfect place that you've created there?
there's certainly some that don't take as well, but I think that might be, honestly, I think that's more of a, you know, of a practices situation than, or it might be bred on the coast and, you know, connected to some sort of practices, you know, like some seeds that we're really excited about that might have been grown like in an indoor environment, you know, like Bodhi seeds, for example. Sometimes they might be a little bit leggy, whereas like ours have like stalks that are a lot stronger. Not to bash on Bodhi's stuff, you know, once those plants get going, they're quite incredible plants. But you know, it's so, yeah, and after just one, if we F that, you know, just after one generation, they really will they'll go from, you know, 50% strength to like just 100% strength in one generation, which is really incredible. And speaks to the strength of this plant, and all plants, really. Plants are quite incredible.
Thank you. You and Sandra seem to like to grow a lot of variety of cannabis on your farm. How could a robust cannabis appellation program support your efforts to market small batch cannabis?
I think that's a great question, and it's definitely something that we've been with all the navigating legal, or all the new changes and everything with Prop 64. Folks would say, "Oh, we need a big batch of this. We need to be uniform, and a big batch of that." And I mean, you know, we started out like in 2018. We had like, you know, a couple of phenos of it. We'd separate the phenos up, and lately we've been mixing them up, and I feel like it's been working out pretty good. I think a lot of times people really, they like cherry lime dog, for example. We had like 3 or 4 different phenos of that, and again, we've just been kind of trusting our own instincts. I would like to have a jar of cherry lime dog that's got a couple different phenos in it, and we just sort of have been trusting our gut and sort of moving forward with that. And I mean, it's interesting though, because people say that our children are 2 fraternal twins that look alike, you know? And so a lot of times it's interesting because we think that they're so different. And, you know, so it's really kind of a subjective thing too. Like, of course, if you haven't seen someone for a year, they see a lot of similarities or something, but to us, we're seeing them every single day. So it's kind of fun in that sense too, because we get to play in the garden and experience all these different phenotypes. And then they are similar too. I mean, we definitely are striving to create, you know, similar phenos within a cultivar. But at the same time, all the little differences are really fun, and they're fun to smoke. And yeah, and a lot of times they're very ssimilars for smoking too.
Thank you. So it sounds like perhaps then maybe in your appellation process, just defining your breeding program and how that results in some variety in the end flower would help a consumer to understand why there is a variety there and to appreciate it and want it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Diversity.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective. Moving on now to talk about how cannabis appellation programs can benefit the plant. We have Patricia and Forrest from Sunroots Farm who are going to talk with us about cannabis appellations and plant breeding for medicine. Thank you.
Hey guys, nice to see you all, and it's awesome seeing the chat and everyone in here communicating. Thank you for having us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us.
You know, a lot of what I am feeling in this, speaking about cannabis breeding for plant medicine, I just want to honor and how we discuss appellations. So these appellations are honoring these different areas that have these unique traits, just like you find with wine. You go to Greece and you find wine that's grown in volcanic soil, And it tastes so much different than any other wine you're going to taste in the world. And the same thing goes for cannabis that you're growing, say in Covelo, where we are in this little valley in the mountains, is going to be unique tasting to somewhere like in BC. So every place is different. And it really reminds me of culture and identity, and how each one of us is an individual and each culture is really beautiful. And now we're taking this plant, cannabis, and we're wrapping it with an identity within the appellations and saying, this is what you're getting when you have cannabis from this area. We're defining it in a way. And that's beautiful to me, because as we know, cannabis originated in Asia before it went to Africa, before it went to Europe, and then the Americas. So we see ourselves traveling as humans, and we see the plant traveling. And so now we have the opportunity to create an appellation for a plant that's traveled. And what's so special about that, and how do we breed and keep this plant unique to where it's from now, even though it's traveled so far? So Forrest has been here for years, well, all his life in these mountains, growing in the same area with his family. And when we're breeding something, we're really only working with plants that we've bred for a long time. And we work with other phenos and seeds that come from our community, this community of cannabis, this little culture here that we've created. For me, it's like, is there any better medicine that you could have that it comes from when medicine comes from your own place, and you have the opportunity to see it from seed to being growing in the garden, to nurturing it, to harvesting it, and then to consuming it, that you're embodying this entire plant. And it's an identity for this plant. And the soil and the location and the air and the water and everything about it, the energetics of the land, that's appellation. And that's to me, that's what's describing this energetic from a plant. So most importantly, we want to see the whole cycle. And we are breeding so that there's that connection. And I'll let Forrest talk more about breeding, because he's been doing it for a lot longer than I have.
Thanks. So yeah, I've been ever since I was started growing, I've always been growing with seeds in the soil, not even really knowing about terroir or appellation. And it's just nice to like know that that's why our weed tastes so good, and like people always liked it, because like it had that connection. So like producing your own seed year after year not only is giving you self-sufficiency, not relying on other people to like supply you with seeds, but you're climatizing your seeds to that area where you're growing and making them stronger, more disease resistant, mold resistant. We had a really bad frost last harvest, which knocked out a lot of gardens around us, and certain varieties of ours didn't even get messed up at all. So just working with what you have, like each year, trying to just pick out the strongest plants that you have to breed with, and keep breeding with those, using your intuition, because when I go in there and pick out my males, I'm like, oh, I'm not even just oh, I want this variety to cross with this one. I'm actually looking at it, taking a little piece, smelling it, rubbing my hand on it, and getting the full
flavor of the plant.
Yeah.
Personality of the plant.
Yeah. So it all matters. Every little part that we're doing matters.
have you chosen your cultivar based on an effect or based on its performance in your area?
Absolutely. Like, you know, like he was talking about the frost that hit us, you could see all the plants that we've been breeding with for years in this certain location that they already, the seed, once it hits the soil, it's like there's an immediate connection because it's already been in that soil before from its parents. So it's almost like there's a recognition. So the following time when there's harvest, yes, we're breeding for plants that do really well, do not mold, do not have a high calling for any pest. So we're just constantly keeping an eye on the plants in order to receive and understand what's going to be the strongest in our gardens.
And not just with the ganja, it's that's with like everything that you're growing, your herbs, your vegetables, you know, because growing your veggies in your garden, that's real medicine right there. Like
yeah,
planting those seeds, growing those seeds, watering them in your garden, watching them grow, and then picking them and cooking them up. That's there's no better medicine than that, I feel like.
I agree. Thank you so much. I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about your perspective on naming cultivars and whether it's important. How confident are you in your ability to say that what you're growing is some percentage of indica versus sativa or something completely different? And then I'm also wondering about your naming conventions for your cultivars and your phenotypes.
Yeah, the names come from inspiration. Again, it's all about like listening to the plant and having an experience with the plant. You know, like when you're smoking a certain variety, say like when we're smoking our Velvet Perks, it definitely feels like an indica to us. And the THC levels are lower because of all the purple that's happening. The plant's putting all its energy towards becoming purple. And we know that at this point, we're all hybrids. Like everyone is a mix. And there's not one bean, plant that is just, there's sometimes land races and there's sometimes these pure things, but you know, it's fun to just acknowledge the fact that most plants, especially in cannabis, are hybrids, and it's very difficult to come across a straight sativa or a straight indica. So we intuitively will say this is an indica hybrid or a sativa hybrid. We'll never really say 100% that this is a indica or sativa because it's not a land race. It's all come from different places. It's got all kinds of different parents and lineage.
Thank you so much for that explanation and for sharing your practices with us. We've made it to our last but not least speaker. You guys, we've made it through 2.5 hours of sitting here together at our screens. It's kind of incredible. I never thought we would do this together. But nor that I'd be happy to do it together. After we're done, we can take some questions from the audience if there are some burning questions. But first, my dear friend Jesse from BioVortex is going to talk to us about Appellation-specific breeding programs and like, what does a breeding program look like and how can we construct these appellations to protect those activities that Josh and Sandra, excuse me, that all of you are participating in, but that Josh and Patricia and Forrest have already talked a bit about. Thank you, Jesse, for being here. I can't hear you, Jesse.
I said I can't do that. That's impossible. But oh man, it's amazing to be joined by this group of people, like multiple Regenerative Cannabis Farm Award winners. We have all these Dragonfly Pure farmers. These farms like truly represent what we want to convey with Appellation, with community-minded ecological growing. And in the case of like Sunroots Farms and Forest, I think like that's a really true example of an appellation of heirloom varieties that have been developed from a very, I mean, from childhood, from family, you know, the generation, and in a soil, in a climate, and understanding how these plants grow, to be able to grow these incredibly large plants by paying attention year after year. That's a true appellation to me. They represent that completely, because this is in the ground, it's soil, it's biodynamic compost, it's breeding year after year, and it's total integration with the community as well. You know, all the amazing farms around there, they know each other and they share. You know, we have Moongazer Farms, like they have taken all of the amazing genetics from all these farms who they've become friends with, and you know, everyone that they've searched out, and just the way that they pursue knowledge, pursue genetics, pursue plants, pursue understanding soil, and just making life thrive. And now they're new twins, and they're amazing, like hugelkultur based cultivation zone that's just all polyculture. So many people's genetics are all together. So it's really an impossible thing to like kind of talk about how we would choose heirloom cultivars at this moment, because we're in an infancy, and we can see in 1 year from what Josh was talking about, like he's taking these really cool things that were maybe done somewhere else, but 1 year of him crossing it, and then that offspring, all of a sudden they're all hardy. 100% of that generation is hardy. They're thick, they're ready. They've taken in that environmental information, and they're intelligent, and they communicate that to that next generation, and they develop that. And so when we're breeding for these different things that are going to work for an environment, I mean, we're looking for resistance, we're looking for thriving ability, but we're also looking for specific medicines. We're also looking for what's going to work in different processes. And when we're talking about appellations, I think the hash world is very, it's very similar to the wine aspect, because it's a process. And what we're doing is we're choosing cultivars, and we're growing them in a certain way, and we're making sure that there's a process where they're completely clean. These trichomes have no dust hitting them. They're developing in a certain way where we have large heads. We're looking at the breeding for trichome morphology, for trichome, for chemovores that actually work for the right combination of terpene and cannabinoids that won't be too volatile, that won't grease out, that will actually catch in a so that will catch in a mesh bag and be able to be really good for ice water hash. And then the flavors that come with that, like, and there's so many different things that aren't necessarily good or bad, you know, whether something greases out or it's more sandy, you know, it's like both these things are really are qualities to be appreciated in different ways. And the end product is something very special, and the different years that they're produced are very special. We put away these amazing ice water hash of perfect, you know, like representation of that plant, of that soil, and then of the process to completely separate it and to wash it cleanly, and then to be able to appreciate that in a very gourmet sense on a quartz, you know, heated platform, and like having that perfect temperature to enjoy that flavor of that time, that place, from that soil to that perfect trichome that we get to expand our consciousness and get to excite our palate and get to enjoy with friends and get to enjoy with food. And when we get to grow food in the same environment that we're enjoying this kind of gourmet experience that we're getting from our psychoactive and our medicines, like it's such an amazing shared experience. So when we go to these farms, like when we're doing the Regenerative Cannabis Farm Award with the Emerald Cup, like we get to go to these farms and then have the most amazing meals and smoke the most amazing herb and connect with the farm, see the animals, put our hands on the soil, be a part of the compost. And that's what appellations like needs to be. And it needs to be promoting all of the farms that I see here, all these faces here, all of you guys, You guys are like, I mean, I love every person here that I'm looking at, and you guys are so a part of the community, and you show these practices and you think critically. Everything that you said, Daniel, like you nail it, you know, like you really pay attention to the environment, you pay attention to how to do food, you critically think, and it's not just about like the simple solution, you really critically think about everything. And like, oh man, all of you guys, like, just so much love to everything that you do. And whatever we construct, what it needs to do is uplift this communication of how we do things, of what is special. And we also need to keep doors open. So like these questions about special cultivars, they kind of concern me at this stage, because we need to be able to innovate. We need to be able to share. And so we can't say something is this or that to a degree that is detrimental. What we need to do is think like, what are the reasons behind these things? And it's to represent and to support these kinds of farms that are doing the ecological and community practices that we need. And it's to educate the public to what these farms are doing and what we need to do in agriculture and what we need to do in medicine, what we need to do in food, what we need to do as humans to heal the earth. And every freaking problem that we have right now can be solved through these solutions, through regenerative agriculture. Every single problem is based off of our imbalance and our out of control concepts of agriculture and how we fuel it, how we, you know, the ways we put energy into it, the way that we move things all across the planet, the way that we disrespect animals, the way that we pack them together, that we, you know, use antibiotics, that we have them piled in their own feces, and like all of these ways that we destroy our health in the way that we grow food, that we don't care about the nutrient density, that we don't care that we're spraying it with poisons, that we don't care that we're giving that to our children. So cannabis is this moment where we have these really strict guidelines on how we can grow our plants and the pesticides that are used on that, where we can use this as a Trojan horse for the rest of agriculture and bring like these farms and bring this education to the forefront of the world, so we can change all of these practices towards regenerative soil building, animal health, towards everything that we're doing should be about human health and about thriving. And if we're not doing that, then we are creating cost. And if we're doing that, then is that helping the economy or is it an illusion? Anyway.
I agree with you so much. And thank you for bringing it all together, that we have an opportunity with Cannabis Appellations to uplift farmers that are practicing methods that can save the planet. If we raised soil carbon percentage by 2% on farmlands, we can offset climate change. Regenerative farmers are doing that. I see you all capturing rainwater to irrigate your plants. I see you all growing food and feeding your community. I see you managing your forests and managing your ecosystems to supply nutrients and carbon into the soil. And having a system that can protect your ability to maneuver and experiment with your farming practices and your genetics is really critical. And it will create a platform for us to educate the masses, and I hope change the status quo of agriculture in our world, because we've gone awry. We have gone to a method that disconnects food production from people and planet completely. And really, when I look at you, I'm so grateful that you all are passionate and dedicated to demonstrating a better way of doing things. So thank you. I'm wondering if Marcus, and thank you for hosting us and keeping us all in order and flowing. I think that most of us here are a little technologically challenged, and you're the glue we need. So I appreciate that. Will you tell us if there are any burning questions from the audience that we might be able to address at this point?
Yeah, there wasn't really too many. I had posted one from a woman named Elizabeth in the chat room that was, but it's kind of a particular question. It was like, I mean, you're welcome to read it, or I can read it. It's in our internal chat room here.
Go for it. Let's hear your voice.
I said, would love to hear more about associating particular cultivars with appellations. This is required by MAU CRSA, but CDFA's draft rules provide an option to associate all cultivars with an appellation.
Thank you. I think that we have touched on this a little bit more, but Jesse, do you want to talk about, or any of us, but we can start with you, Jesse, about how requiring a commitment to one cultivar type within an appellation may limit the farmer's ability?
Yeah, I addressed it a little bit in that I am concerned about what we do in our infancy at this moment, because I think it is important to develop heirlooms, but that takes time and it's really early right now. There definitely are some, so like we want to protect that, but what we need to do is really actually invite innovation and encourage farms and people to be breeding for things that they want for themselves and that work for their climate. And I think the more that we open up the possibilities for how people are breeding and innovating on their own farms, the better we will all do, both economically and for medicine and just the genetic potential, because then we will have things that can work in lots of different environments. It can produce lots of different chemovores, and have all these different minds and love and thought going into the things that are going to go into our medicine. But you know, in general, it takes many years before you would have an established heirloom genetic in a certain place. You know, someone like Green Source Gardens has been doing an excellent job in just a very short period of time of doing, you know, making sure that they are doing generational sibling crosses of their selections that work in their environment. And a lot of these farms here do that as well. Definitely Sunroots, like all of these farms actually do that. So, you know, I think we really need to keep things open for that at the moment. And at a certain point when maybe we really have some established heirlooms, we can continue creating ethical protections for that.
Thank you, Jesse. Swami, did you have something?
Well, Jesse's talking about the broader picture in this sense, but the way the regulations have come down, it doesn't prohibit that. It doesn't allow that. In fact, in the cultivar part, the appellation of origin with standards, practices, and cultivars is the way it's written. But you're allowed to actually fill that blank by saying you actually can forbid a cultivar and satisfy that requirement, right? But you only need to mention one to begin with. And the other thing is that the petition, once it's submitted, is capable of being amended, right? It's written into the thing. Now, the problem is, and to amend your petition as a group of cannabis growers for an appellation, it's going to cost $10,000 unless they change that. So we're trying to persuade them to say 2 levels or 3 levels of change in your petition. One is just to include another cultivar, would cost you $1,000 for your appellation, right? Whereas if you're going to completely change and rewrite your whole petition, that or whatever major amendment would be $10,000. That's bureaucratic cost, you see. But the question is, we don't have to limit ourselves only to what we submit in the petition. It's not written that way. You can amend it later, and also you can simply satisfy that requirement by mentioning something that you don't want to grow, or that one particular cultivar, but that wouldn't be the only one, as a technical question.
Swami, will you share with us a cultivar that you would exclude from your appellation and a cultivar that you would definitely want to include?
Well, maybe you could say something like that you would not take a cultivar that it came from a foreign country or something like that. I don't know. But I think what you would say is if you had a cultivar that perhaps always had powdery mildew in your area, you'd say, well, let's agree not to grow that because then that brings powdery mildew and shares it with other farmers. That would be a reason to say something like that. Now, as we know from other people, and we also know ourselves, if you take and you grow from seed and you grow 2 or 3 generations down the line, then your plant is either going to show it ain't going to make it, or it's a good plant to be in that environment and it won't get the mildew, right? But it's not, the way the law is written or the regs is written, it's not that limiting. There's kind of a workaround there.
I agree that the narrative approach is a good way to handle the cultivar just requirement for California. And I also agree that the growing season is at the place is going to be one of the obvious ways to exclude cultivars. If you have a short growing season, not everything will work there. Does anybody have anything they want to say before we wrap up? We're all good?
I just wanted to say really quickly that one thing that wasn't mentioned here is the fact that cannabis is a mind altering thing. It makes us think a certain way. It gives us medicine in a way that expands our mind, that helps us think original thought, that helps us think beyond what's just maybe given to us in the media, that makes us go out and maybe find deeper relationships or even feel the relationships in our life work. It's a incredible mentally and emotionally healing plant. And when we grow it with gathering all of nature for us to be able to beneficial community, it makes us of our relationship with nature.
And I think that it's a little different than wine, and the appellations obviously used in wine a lot because wine is a lot of times grown from clones and having like fields of clones, and that's really not what we're doing. So our plants are changing so much every year. It'd be really hard to say that we would have one cultivar forever and it would be like part of our appellation. I mean, maybe Marcus could weigh on this for a second, but like here in British Columbia, there's a certain amount of plants that we can grow outdoors underneath the sun with it finishing. We have a northern climate. It's really, really hard. So we would have a certain appellation in that we have we live in an inland temperate rainforest, the only inland temperate rainforest in the world, and it's a really unique environment, and plants really do grow really well here. But again, it's really far north, so like we're on Marcus's channel right now, there's a lot of hash varieties we could never grow here unless we had a covering or a very a light greenhouse, no mixed light. But we think, I mean, in a way, appellation for us up here is going to have to do with our practice, the fact that we're using our native soil, the fact that our plants are living and breathing with the air, they're connected to the light, and they're connected to the nature cycles and to the moon cycles. So for us to truly have appellation and to grow plants under the sun, there's a small variety of plants that we can grow, but there are really unique varieties that have been growing outdoors here in British Columbia for a long time. The whole coastal environment is really different from this inland environment.
Thank you. I agree. I think that we are good for now, but we have had such a rich conversation, and I am feeling like we've done a good job today. Thank you.
I think there's one thing that we forgot to do. Everyone should show the camera what they're puffing on or what they're growing at their farm. If they have a little flower, this is always something that people enjoy that we do on Hash Church. I'm sure they'd enjoy it here as well. It only takes a minute. Here's some bubble hash that looks like rosin.
We just had some nice CBD inside of a myco cacao drink here. So we're working on cannabinoids and drinking some endo breath.
Nice.
And we just are getting ready to plant some Voltron mixed with the velvet perps. So a Voltron velvet perp.
Yeah. I
Nice.
just smoked some of the velvet perps and I'm feeling really good. So I'm just so happy we're all complete, and hopefully we can keep educating everybody and they educating us.
And what I wanted to say also is that, you know, all of these regenerative practices and everybody here is doing the best that they possibly can. And it's so important for consumers to really find regenerative farmers and people that are doing it so that we can continue, so small farmers can continue having a place in the cannabis industry. So all the consumers out there, please ask your dispensaries about regeneratively grown, organically grown flowers so these small farmers can continue to be a part of the market and can continue to be a part of the conversation.
And I'd like to mention like that cannabis is a divine gift. The plant has been given to us as humans thousands of years ago, and we have then developed and evolved with this plant. This plant has taught us agriculture. This plant has taught us sharing community. And there's a spiritual dimension of cannabis that we all share, but we don't talk about it very much, but we know in our hearts that we have that, and that's the essential nature of this plant. And that is the source of its healing. It's the source of its inspiration. It's the source of its causing us to think in different ways. And so we celebrate this plant, and we are honored to be chosen by her to be her representatives and to present her best features to the world.
Boom Shankara, Shankara Mahadev.
Hara 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 Mahadev. Thank you all so much. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you for being Dem Pure. Thank you for being all who you are. And we keep this movement alive by doing what we do best and sharing and opening our hearts and celebrating this plant. So I'm really honored to be part of all of this. Thank you so much.